Hey friends, I see there's a lot of early birds. I'm gonna pause the video actually.
Just drop the Padlet link and the password is flowers. Okay, so we're going to move on. I would love, before we start, to also just ask folks to think about these 4 guidelines as key to having a successful call today. Hanna, do you mind switching to slide 3?
Yeah. Sorry, do you mind just doing screen share from yours, and that, if that's possible? Yeah.
Great. Can everyone see?
Yes. Perfect.
Awesome. Okay, so these 4 guidelines are key to ensuring that we're all really present on this call. So I'm going to ask that folks remove distractions if possible. I know we often have a million tabs open while we're on calls, but I hope today that we can just focus on this one. Get a beverage if you need to help yourself focus. I'm drinking my coffee right now. It's morning for me. Get note-taking stuff if that's useful for you, maybe on paper, maybe on a Word document, and center yourself. I have recently been having really bad posture, so I'm trying to remind myself on calls to sit up straight. And next, I just want to lead us through a really brief breathing exercise to remind us that we all have bodies right now in this time of being on call after call after call as we're separated from each other. So if folks have a window near them or can see the sun somewhere, maybe look towards that. Otherwise, just go ahead and breathe along with me. We're going to take 5 deep breaths. Breathe in. Breathe out. Breathe in. Breathe out. Breathe in. Breathe out. Breathe in. Breathe out. I hope that was 5 breaths. I kind of lost track. All right, so next, moving into the agenda, an overview of this call so folks know the roadmap of where we'll be going. We've done the introductions and expectations. Those are also known as the house rules. We're going to do next a quick check-in around all of the folks on this call, giving you the opportunity to play with a little interactive tool that we have that is a great tool that you can all feel free to use in your own calls to kind of assess, read the room, see where folks are at. Then after that, we're going to get into the bulk of the call, which is going to be talking about ways before, during, and after the call to navigate the software of Zoom. We're going to be speaking about other platforms briefly at the top of the call, particularly in thinking about advantages and disadvantages that all of these platforms have. But we're going to focus on Zoom today, both because we're using Zoom and because it's a really widely used platform right now that I know a lot of folks feel the need to really understand how to navigate. And there are a lot of facets to this, both in thinking about how to prepare for calls and setting up all of the right settings to set yourself up for success, how to navigate Zoom and other tools during the call to facilitate a productive and generative meeting, and then how to follow up best and access all of the materials that you'll need from that call in order to distribute the resources to the attendees. And then we'll discuss feedback briefly at the end. If you have any questions about the agenda, again, feel free to stick them in the chat and Hanna will respond to them. But next, we're going to move into this little interactive break that we're going to have, in which I'm going to ask everyone to look at this, I don't know what to call this sort of chart we have of a bunch of different platforms. You'll see Google Docs, Google Sheets, Zoom, GoToMeeting, broadcasting tools, Slack, and you see on the right, we have a bunch of stickers. The top is beginner, the middle is I know some but could learn more, and the bottom, the lightning bolt, is an expert. And if you see what looks like a bunch of piles of these X's, these arrows, and these lightning bolts, they're actually movable. So I'm going to ask if folks have opened the presentation. If you don't worry, to drag these stickers into the place that you think best describes your own relationship to this platform. So if you love Zoom, you think Zoom is so easy, you feel like you know all of the tools, maybe drag a lightning bolt, but if it's something that you think you really would love to learn a little bit more around, do the beginner. And try not to drag the boxes themselves. I see someone accidentally dragged the Cisco box. Hanna, are you able to fix that? I can't do that on my screen share. Thank you. Great, so it looks like I see this really populating. It's getting a little messy, which is totally normal. We have, I think, like 60 or 70 people on this slide right now. And you can see already that there's a lot of folks who use things like Google Docs and consider themselves experts. Very few people use Cisco WebEx. Looks like we have some beginners and some folks who would like to learn more about interactive presentations. Same thing with breakout groups. That's really awesome to hear. I really enjoyed doing our breakout groups in the call last Thursday. I know that was the first time for a lot of folks, and it was a fun way to get to know people in their breakout room. On these big calls, they're often such a great tool in order to increase person-to-person interaction. Great. Thanks so much, everyone, for filling this out so quickly. It's really interesting for Hanna and I to see as well where folks are wanting to learn a bit more. I also just would love to draw out of this that there are so many things that there's a wide variety of people who are beginners, want to learn more, or are experts, and that's totally okay. Everyone is at a different place with all of these tools, and we're all constantly learning. And I feel like this exercise is showing that incredibly clearly. Great. So I think we're going to move on. Maybe I'll give folks a few more seconds if there's last stickers you'd like to throw in there. And this is a great tool, by the way, for your own calls. This is kind of a really simple exercise around platforms, but I could imagine you doing this as an icebreaker with some like fun get to know you questions at the beginning, or even in the meeting itself if you have a more serious decision to be making around like a poll or a decision between two things. You could use this exercise in order to see where folks are at. It allows a lot of interaction and ability to read the room and see where your audience is at. So great, let's go ahead and move on to steps before the call that you can take to best prepare yourself to register or to prepare yourself for an effective meeting. So most importantly, it's really key that you decide on the platform that you're going to use, set it up, and get really familiar with it beforehand. It's never fun to try to be navigating Zoom during the call and figuring out a tool if you haven't ever tried it before. So the best thing to do is really get familiar with the platform beforehand. If you decide on a tool, for example, the one we just used, the sticker in place, try to practice it beforehand so that not only you can do it, but you can also teach your audience to do it. And make sure to inform your moderators about the platform and tools that you're using and what your expectations are of them as moderators. So Hanna and I discussed before this that since I would be leading these first few slides, I'm expecting that she's able to answer the questions in the chat. But if we hadn't talked about that beforehand, unfortunately, there would be a lot of folks who have questions unanswered right now. So making sure that you have really clear communication over which tools, which person are responsible for is really key. And sometimes on smaller calls, you're going to be responsible for all of the tools, and that's okay. Hanna's going to show us how to use all of those later in this call. So for that first step, deciding on a platform, setting it up, and getting familiar with it, we hope that this matrix that we've created will be a good starting place with that. So this is part of a larger project that Hanna and I have touched on in some of these, in the last call and a little bit on this call as well, of wanting to create a larger toolkit around these resources that we're touching on in these three calls, but also want to make accessible beyond them. So this matrix is in the works. I'm not going to say that it's a final version, but we wanted to share what we have so far with you because I think it's a useful tool to be thinking through your options. So you'll see along the top, I'm also going to zoom in a little because I know that this is small font. Oh, that might be a little too big. So you'll see along the top, you have the platform that you could be using for a virtual meeting. And we are in no way able to make an exhaustive list on just this slide. These are some of the most popular options or ones that we wanted to draw your attention to. But they include things like Zoom, Skype, Google Hangouts, GoToMeeting, Maestro Conference, VoiceBoxer. Many of us have used a WhatsApp group call, and BlueJeans. And then you can see on the columns on the right, we've categorized them based on some common needs that folks might have when they're searching for a platform that will meet the needs of their call. So some of these platforms are really good for large meetings because they have the bandwidth to stretch. Some are really good for small meetings. Some are able to do screen sharing like I'm doing right now. You all are able to see what I am seeing on my computer screen so that we're all looking at the same thing, which is really useful in virtual meetings. Some have closed captioning, some have live translation services, all of them at a cost though. And then we have a section that describes some of the typical costs and upgrade packages, because so many of these platforms cost more as you try to introduce more participants into your meetings. And then the last column we have is around just additional barriers to use, which feels like an important catch-all category around some of the things that might not be on the website advertising this platform, but folks who have used this platform for a long time might know about it or are important to flag before settling on that platform as your choice. So for example, we can go through all of these, but if we want to look at Zoom as the example, because we're all on it now, and I know that lots of us have used Zoom in the last few days or weeks, you can see that Zoom is actually really hitting a lot of these marks. It's good for both large meetings and small meetings. It's really important to flag that in the cost column, you can see that the free option for a free account on Zoom only allows calls up to 40 minutes, and they only allow up to 100 participants. But $14 a month, which is the beginning pay package, allows unlimited time for your calls. So you can go to that typical 1 hour, 2 hour call, but still only 100 participants. The next step you can do costs even more, but you'll be allowed to have up to 500 participants. And sometimes that's a useful tool to have available to yourself as well if you're just not sure how many people will show up to your call. Or to be honest, in Hanna, in my experience, even if you have, say, 95 participants on a call, sometimes the bandwidth for the 100 participant limit gets so stretched that it's more effective to have the 500 limit in the first place. But it's really critical to remember that cost is prohibitive for many of these accounts. So additional barriers around Zoom are that, of course, video conferencing requires fairly strong internet connection, which is another reason that we're asking as part of our house rules for folks to turn off their video. So using call-in can sometimes be used to mitigate that. So if folks have connection to call in via their phone, they can still participate in the meeting. Though, as we discussed last week in the accessibility call, that introduces a set of other things to think through in terms of if you're sending out the materials to look through beforehand so that people on their phone can still adequately participate and know what's being discussed on the call. We also are able to use screen sharing in Zoom, and there is closed captioning, though you can see also in that parentheses, it's a particular kind of closed captioning in which a third party needs to write it. So I hope one big takeaway from this matrix in general is just that all of these platforms are different, right? And it's key to kind of know what you're looking for and what is important to you on this call. So if closed captioning is the most important thing to you in a 5-person meeting, maybe Zoom is actually not the best way to go, because you can see that things like Google Hangouts or GoToMeeting actually include closed captioning, but you don't need a third party. If you are wanting to have a conference that has 2,000 attendees, one of your probably only options will be Maestro Conference, which you can also see is incredibly expensive. If you're wanting to just chat between 3 people, but it would be really nice to have video on, there's no need to pay for a really expensive service, because there's several of these platforms here that are good for small meetings and allow for screen sharing. So I hope that this matrix is useful to you all, and Hanna and I are going to be building it out and including some of the other platforms that are, being innovated and being created right now, and also being changed always, I think, to try to increase their accessibility and introduce new tools. But hopefully this is useful to put all of the resources in one place and think through some key cross-line themes that you might need to look for. So another way to think about this.
And I have, I'm sorry, it's Ulla Madsen from Software International. Can I just come in for a second?
Sorry, Ulla, please use the chat
I just
or
have some
raise your hand.
comments.
Yes, sure.
Yeah, and thank you for this overview. It's very helpful. But I have to say that we have been warned about Zoom the last couple of days.
Sorry, Ulla, we're going to table your question because this is indeed something that everyone has on their mind. We will get to that later.
Good.
But for everyone else, if you do have questions, we really do want you to ask questions. And if you don't want to do it in the chat, please raise your hand and we will get to you, I promise you.
Yes, so Hanna should be answering questions in the chat right now. And thank you for that question, Ulla. I also just want to say that's going to be the theme of the whole third call that we're going to have next Thursday is digital security. And there is so much coming up right now around privacy and security with Zoom in particular. And one thing Hanna and I were actually just talking about is with this matrix, introducing a column on security, because that's an emerging space in which there's a lot of conversation about what the best platform is and also what are tools we can use to protect ourselves. So I would encourage everyone to tune into that third call in the series next week as well.
Sorry, Bara, before you move ahead, I just wanted to raise some things that were said in the chat that adds to it. So as we have someone who's sharing that they have done stakeholder interviews on WhatsApp and it's been working, but it's good for groups of 4, and that's what we were saying before. It's really accessible, WhatsApp, but it really doesn't work for really big calls. But if you're doing small calls, then why not use WhatsApp? Then we had a question about, is Zoom secure? I promise we will get to that later. It is, and this is what I keep telling to people, it's secure as long as you know how to use it. And that's what we're showing today. And then we have a question about closed captioning. Has anyone tried closed captioning for meetings where participants speak 2 different languages as a form of simultaneous translation? So I know, for example, we tried not 2 at the same time, but you can have closed captions and you can also have someone doing sign language. So that works at the same time. But yeah, sorry.
No, thank you.
And then, I don't think I had anything to add. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll just go over slide 9 and then I'll ask if there's anything that you want to add, Hanna, based on your experience as well. So slide 9 is another matrix that is kind of the matrix in slide 8 in a different form. So if you want to think really holistically about advantages and disadvantages for each of these platforms, they are existing in the matrix in slide 8, but this hopefully summarizes and synthesizes these pros and cons more clearly. So if someone, on your team is interested in trying to introduce more of Google Hangouts and they've heard really good things about it, you can pull up this resource and you can know that, yes, Google Hangouts is actually really well known for having really strong closed captioning. It's probably the best closed captioning service in a platform that I've ever used. And it's also free, which are 2 key things. But a really key con to keep in mind is that the meeting creator or the person who is trying to start the meeting must have Google Suite. So just some pros and cons to always keep in mind when you're thinking about maybe introducing a new platform, experimenting with a platform, or you're just hoping to share. Hanna, is there anything around these platforms? Again, we can't go into each and every one, but sort of key learnings or benefits, disadvantages for any of these platforms that I wasn't able to touch on?
No, I mean, there's a lot of, it all comes down to what people are experiencing using. I do think it's something that was raised in our call last week for those who weren't in that call, Zoom is more accessible for people with disabilities, whereas GoToMeeting is not as accessible. I think that's something to really take into consideration when you set these up. Zoom is also, it requires less bandwidth, so it makes it more accessible for those who don't have strong bandwidth or access to internet. In terms of webinars and meetings, the reason why we haven't listed webinars here is because this is a training on virtual meetings. Webinars are not interactive, but you will see the UN, for example, will try and have something that is more like a webinar. You can also have broadcasting options. So the most common one would be Facebook broadcasting, right? That would be like the live thing. But there's also really big platforms for broadcasting. Again, that does not work if you are going to have an interactive session, because then how do you decide who is a passive viewer and who is an interactive viewer? But I would recommend you, when you are planning your virtual meeting, to use something, either you practice it very well beforehand, or use something that you are comfortable with using. Then again, it makes it more difficult when you want to do something that is more language or sign language, when it needs to have that incorporated. But exactly. I think now we could have like a couple of minutes for questions, if there's any urgent questions of what's happened so far. I know there's so many questions about security, but we have tried to split up all these content into three sessions. So anything digital security wise will be touched upon next week. But a little bit about emerging Zoom security will be talked about today.
And also back to the agenda, Hanna will be speaking next about the tools that you can use in Zoom to prepare yourself to make the most safe call. So if you're interested in learning about tools we can implement today to improve our security, that will be up next.
Yeah, we have a question from Catherine Klein. How do you make PowerPoint accessible to those with disabilities? This was talked about last week. We can share you the link, but it's also at the end of this slide. There's quite a lot of ways you can make it accessible. For example, you share the virtual presentation in advance, but all of that was touched upon last week, so we're not going to go into depth on that this week. Right, now it's my turn. I'm gonna share my screen. And for live stream feature on Zoom, does the user need to have host privileges to live stream? Also, if the call is hosted on someone else's account. Do you mean screen share? Is that what you mean by live stream, Keisha? All right, so now I am moving my chat away and doing a little quick check-in with you all. How are you feeling? It was a lot of information. So going back to the slide, for those who are following the virtual presentation and not my screen, we're on slide 10. And before we started, I'm gonna launch a little poll for you. So you should all be able to see what I'm doing. And I'm gonna launch this. So this is what it looks like when you launch a poll. And please take a second to fill in which software you would like to know more about. So I already know from you filling in slide 6 that you seem to be experts on Google Docs. Google Forms, not so much. Okay, so while you're voting, it seems like it's quite even. Getting a lot of votes, that's very nice. So if you can see my screen, and if it's okay if you don't, I can follow and see how many people has voted. And I'm gonna end the poll, and it seems like Google Slides it is. Right, perfect. Going back to slide 10. Okay, so we are going to talk a lot about Zoom today, and that's what we've been saying. But before talking about that, before talking about that, we wanted to talk about other collaborative tools, because you don't always have to have a meeting to work with people online. I know there's loads of different teamwork tools like Slack and Teams and Asana and Trello. I know we are all using WhatsApp very often. For better and for worse, certain things you cannot share on WhatsApp and certain things you can. If you have bigger groups on WhatsApp, for example, you really shouldn't use it for sensitive information, but you can use it for what we're using it now to share just events, etc., and newsletters, etc. But we have created, so there is an extensive list of tools that you can find on the slide number 10. But in terms of, for those following my screen share, and I advise you all to click on your Zoom so that you can follow my screen share. We got a lot of you voted that you wanted to learn more about Google slides or presentations. This is what a Google Drive looks like. Most likely all of you have something that looks like this. It might be structured differently. You can always start a Google slide wherever you are. And then what you do is you start it like this. You either use a blank presentation or for a template. And you will get something that looks like an empty presentation. I'm not going to go too much into it, but what we wanted to touch upon, which applies to all G Suite software, is that when you work collaboratively online, it's always important to set those kind of guidelines for how to interact. And many of you are Google Docs experts, so that means you already know that when you have a Google Doc that people can give input to, at the top of the document, you always have to inform people that they can only add changes in track mode, etc. But there are ways to figure out, so if people are doing edits, so I can now see that I have more than 36 people on this spreadsheet, the presentation. The good thing is that an interactive presentation is accessible for people with disabilities, but it's also accessible for, like a lot of people can copy this and they can Google Translate it. It's also good because as a facilitator, I can see where you are. I can see that a lot of people are following me on the slides, some people are moving ahead, and then I see where the focus is at. Another thing that is quite interesting with a Google slide is that you can have it quite interactive in very various ways. So you can either have a slide like we had on slide 6 where people are literally very active and doing things. Another way you can have people being active is to have them add comments in the speaker box. And that's why usually we don't leave too many notes in the speaker boxes. And you can also, just like in any other G Suite software, you can add comments to slides. So this is the commenting. And I see, for example, on slide 5, someone has added a comment, and that was actually me. But how you add is, you just click on that and then you add a comment. So it's very similar to a normal Google Doc. And another thing for those, like either you notice or you don't, but another very important thing if you're facilitating online collaboration on G Suite is that you can track changes that's been done. So say that one slide disappeared here and we had no idea, like someone accidentally deleted it. You can go back in editing history. You can pull out older versions. So don't want to linger too much on this. I think if we have urgent questions, don't hesitate to ask. But there are a lot of things you can do with a presentation, just like you would be able to do on a PowerPoint. But the thing with having it online is that you can have interactive elements in a way you couldn't do with a presentation that you have. For example, we had post-its last week and we will have it this week as well. And post-its you can make by yourself by dragging a text box and putting it in. You can add symbols. You can play around with layout. And so in one way, it's very similar to a PowerPoint. You can present it, but I prefer sharing it like this, because then people can also see what is coming next and where are we and what are the comments, because I usually think that most comments should be accessible to everyone, right? And then the important thing, and also this is like either you know it or you don't, the way you share it, you can share it just like this is true for any kind of Google Doc or Google spreadsheet. You can edit the axis, so either people can edit it or just view it. So anyone with the link, or it can be public. I would advise you strongly to never have anything public. Sorry, I'm gonna stop your video. But anyone with the link, and then you can decide whether or not they can edit and comment. Comment that it's a little bit like track changes, then you can keep track of who is asking for what kind of change. In the same way you would do with a Google Doc. So now I accidentally turned off the editing for you. So I will change that back. And this is how you play around. So, but I don't want to linger too much on this. If this is something you would like to have more training on, I'm happy to go deeper into depth at another time. And you could email us, or in the feedback session of this call, you can let us know if you would like to know more about G Suite. But the purpose of this call was really to talk you through Zoom. So we're now going to go to slide 11. And the structure of today's call, as you saw, is what to do before a call, what to do during a call, and what to do after a call. And I know a lot of people have seen these news about Zoom bombing and how hackers are hijacking screens and taking over, and hackers are mining your data, etc., etc. And there are ways around this. And from what I keep telling my colleagues is that it's all about whether or not you are a good facilitator, because if you're a good facilitator, you can completely block hackers. So this is, for those of you who don't have Zoom, this is what Zoom looks like. So there are some things you need to, this is the WCF Zoom, so welcome to all our meetings. There are some things to keep an eye on. So when you schedule a meeting, we're gonna schedule a test meeting so you see all the functions. So this is test. You might want to edit to something else. We're gonna have it today at 5, blah, blah, blah. Registration. So this is one of the things that Zoom has come out and told users, that we strongly advise everyone to always use registration. And this is why you see for our training that we have used registration, because then you can keep an eye on who has come on. And if you have troublemakers, such as hackers, you can more easily identify who they were. It makes it a little bit more tricky for some people who's not used to registration. It takes them a couple of times to get used to it. But it's really where online meetings are heading. So I would just always recommend you, if you're hosting a meeting, to have a registration. And you can edit the registration. I will show you later how. They've also implemented that you should require a password. You don't necessarily need to do it, but if you are a risk group that tends to be attacked by trolls and hackers, I would totally advise you to do it, but it's very easy to copy paste the password. In terms of the meeting ID, here it becomes a little bit more tricky. So the personal meeting ID, I would advise you against to use. Like, don't ever use the personal meeting, because if the personal meeting works in a way that when, like, it's a ID that it can, like, if once someone gets hold of it, they can always get onto your meetings, but only those meetings starting as a personal meeting. But if you generate new calls every time, then hackers who gets hold of your personal meeting ID, they won't automatically get onto all your calls. So always use generate automatically. Here's another security feature. A video should always be off. participants should also always have the videos off when they join a call. It's just common practice, and it's better for it's just easier for everyone, and it's nicer for everyone. The same goes for audio. And when it comes to meeting options, I would also advise you to not have enable join before host, because then people can have, I mean, that could be good because people can have discussions with each other, but it's also now, during Zoom bombings, it would be a possibility for Zoom bombers to kind of spread bad, like any kind of bad information while you're not on the call. So I usually always have it off, because then I can control more what's going on during my call. The same goes to, you can have something called enable waiting room. If a waiting room is sort of like everyone who's registered and everyone who is clicking on the join Zoom link, they get put in the waiting room, and they only get access to the call once the facilitator, like me, would accept you. So it pops up like a little window. This is also a way to keep a control of who is joining your call. So if you are having a very secure, like security issue call, if you're talking about something super sensitive and you want to have full control on who's on the call, I would strongly advise you to use enable waiting room. Whereas for this call, I turned it off because I don't think that the invitation of this training session would lead to any hackers wanting to come on the call. Also, I strongly, since we haven't posted the links on social media, I don't see how they possibly could get hold of the invite. You can also use this for breakout room, but I will look at more at this later. And then you can decide whether or not you want to record a meeting automatically. But do remember that not everyone wants to be recorded, so it's always good to ask people. And then just save it. And now you have a meeting that's scheduled for today. Oh, we accidentally put a password in. We don't want the password. So then we edit it. We remove it, but we want to require registration. And then I save it. So now the test meeting looks like this for me. You can edit the registration link. So now the registration link looks like this. It's very, very basic. But if you go to registration and email settings, sorry, no, I'm here. You can change the questions that get asked. So you are on registration, you go to registration options and then edit. And then you click on questions, and then you can add if you want city, country, industry, yeah, you name it. You can also add your own custom questions. So first save all. And then you can add your custom questions. It could be, do you like food? I mean, everyone does, but okay. And that you can have as a required or not a required. And then the registration page looks a little bit different. So then it looks like everything that I clicked in, right? And this is a reCAPTCHA. This gets added automatically. So I know a lot of people are worried that this is not disability friendly. It actually is different for screen readers. They've now set it up so this is accessible for screen readers. It used to not be. So this is, you shouldn't need to be too worried about it. But anyway, going back to the backdrops of setting up a meeting, others email settings are important is the email contacts of the call. So this has been set up to automatically always put Audrey on. And Audrey is my colleague in the Netherlands. This needs to be changed if there's someone else hosting the call, because otherwise all the questions she gets will, like all the questions I get will be directed to her. So I would have to edit this and invite Hanna. So then you can also edit this, the preview email. You can edit the branding, and you can set up a poll. So if we, for example, look at So this is what it looks like, and you can add it to your calendar. If you look at the call that I set up today, then we will see a little bit of this. So I have 208 who registered to this meeting. I can view all of you, but maybe through GDPR I shouldn't, but I can very quickly see that I have 28 pages of email addresses that I can extract afterwards. And I can show you later how you extract it. Email settings, I had it changed already. For branding, I changed and I had this. And I set up a poll beforehand. You can also set up a poll during, but I will look at that in a little bit. Sorry, I'm moving ahead too quickly. What I really wanted to show you is the settings. So this is key. So for all of those who are quite worried about security, this is how you master your Zoom call. So you go to the backdrop, you go to settings, and I'm going to talk you through all of these and why they're important. If I go too quickly, please don't hesitate to stop me and ask me questions. So now I am opening up for you to ask questions openly. But and I will explain why I have some settings turned off and some settings not. So I've always the videos turned off that I explained before. I'd also explain why I don't want to join the host before the host on. And a lot of these are not really that applicable, but the ones that are interesting for us to use is the passwords. Either you have passwords or you don't, it's for you to decide. But and I think I didn't explain to you where you can find your personal meeting ID. So your personal meeting ID is on your profile. This is constant. This is always the same. So I could share this with you and I can say, please join me in a call in an hour. And I wouldn't have to set up a meeting with you. But if this ends up in the wrong hands, then anyone can, like hackers can try and restart it ever so often until they get onto one of my private calls. And so once they have it, they can index this and they will forever have it unless you change it. You can change it. But this has been one of the issues that we've seen in the news from Zoom, is that a lot of spam bots and hackers got on people's personal IDs. So this is why I said before, never use your personal ID. Just don't do it. If you do want to do it, going back to settings, you can require password for all meeting IDs, but then again, you can turn it off if you want to. And these are all password related, so I'm skipping them. And this is also, okay, so here are some things that are, so we are in meeting basic settings. There are positive things with the chat is that you can keep a conversation in the chat. You can talk to other people on the chat. But what Zoom has recommended people is to turn off private chat in really, really big meetings. Like usually like in a meeting like this, if we had lots of different sectors on the call, I would have turned off the private chat. But since I know that all of you are within my networks, I trust that like there wouldn't be anything hostile on this call. But if you have a call that's more open and you have published on social media, for example, you might want to consider turning off the private chat. And the reason is that hackers and spammers and trolls, they have used the private chats to target participants, to send very, I mean, there's various different content that we've seen that they've shared. It's been like nudity, it's been harassment, racial slurs, etc. And like very, very offensive racial slurs. So if you have something that is very open for the public, I would recommend you to turn off the chat. Also then you might want to turn off preventing, depending on if you want people to save the chat, but if you're doing something that's very, has to do with security, maybe some of you do work on those kind of topics, then I would also click on preventing from saving chat. Another thing that they have recommended at Zoom is to turn off the file transfer. So they launched a feature that you could share files in the chat box. And this is also something that was used by different trolls to share really offensive things. Again, it's for you as a facilitator to think about the audience of your call. If it's with your trusted colleagues or your network members and it's only been shared on trusted newsletter or like trusted listservs, then you don't have to be too worried about it. But if you're using social media to share info about your meeting, then you should consider that as well. Co-host. So for certain features to show up on this bar here that you can see. So you can see poll, you can see more, breakout rooms, annotations. For these to kind of show up here, you have to enable them in settings. So I have enabled polling, and that's why there's a polling thing here. And here is one of the key things. So screen sharing, and this is one of the biggest security features I have done since all these Zoom bombings started happening. Screen sharing is also a way that trolls have used to take over the control of the call, and they have started sharing their screens, and then they've shared various of different horrible things. I would just put that on host only, and then whoever is presenting you make a co-host. For example, at the beginning of this call, I went to participants, and then I hovered over Mara's name, and I made her a co-host. For example, if I would like to make August Boyer, if I would like to make August Boyer a co-host, I would click on more and make co-host, and then August would be able to share their screen. And so that's a way that you can be a proactive facilitator without giving access to everyone to share their screens. And sorry, Mara, if you see any pressing questions that you think everyone should see or hear, just let me know and you can raise them out loud.
Yeah, can I actually do that, Hanna?
Yeah, sure.
So thanks for that last piece. That was actually a question that Eleanor raised in the chat that I thought was a really good one. Not only around making other people co-hosts, but also that you can do that before or during a meeting. Mm-hmm. And you can make someone a co-host in addition to yourself, or you can also transfer host abilities.
Yeah.
And you can do that during the call as well. You'll just use the more options next to a person's name when you're looking at the participant list on the call itself. Yeah. So that's really useful in order to give folks screen sharing.
So maybe I can show you then how you do it before a call.
Yeah.
So if we go to our test meeting that we set up. So you go to meetings. You go to the test, but they have to enable to add them beforehand. Oh, I can't add it now. Oh yeah, before you launch it. So when you have a new meeting, before you launch it, you have to add their email at the bottom. So you add them here. Sorry, that was very quick. So if you launch a new meeting, but once you've set up the meeting, you cannot add alternative hosts, unfortunately. Anyone who's an alternative host can start the call. So if you're running late, you can, and you have an alternative host, they can start it for you.
And then I would also bring up some questions right now that are coming up around hosts. Is there a limit to hosts? I actually, Hanna, if you know this, please jump in, but I think that this changes based on what you are paying for. And Laxman, you're correct. The alternative host, if you're setting it up beforehand, that person's email address that you're putting in does need to have a Zoom account. Go ahead, Hanna.
I've never seen anything about the limitation of hosts, and there's nothing in the packages about it. So I have not yet encountered a roof on it. But that's something we can table, and we can get back to you after this meeting.
Yeah, I seem to recall an experience I had where they wouldn't let me make more than 5, but that might have been before some updates last year. So we will table that question and find out, and then we'll add that to our matrix because that's a really important factor. So thanks for bringing that up. And then another one that I wanted to bring up was a question around if you have like a very confidential meeting, what are the sort of benefits of using passwords, or would pre-registration in a waiting room suffice? My recommendation would be, if it's a highly confidential meeting that you're extremely concerned hackers will find their way onto, passwords are the most secure and best option. I would just take the time to talk with your team or whoever is going to be on that call about what passwords are, why you're using them, and how to use them, because I think they're often a new piece of Zoom that some folks haven't used before. Pre-registration and a waiting room are really good tools, particularly for large calls like this. But
if you are having a very secure call, I would say you just have to use the waiting room because you have full control on who's coming on the call then. So that would be...
And you can do both. You can have password and waiting room, which is like the more layers of security, the better. You just also need to make sure that you know how to use those tools and that it's not too many things sort of happening at once for you. The waiting room, essentially what will happen is you'll see a name pop up and you can allow them to come in or not. So you can imagine that that would be a really effective screening tool if you know the names of everyone who will be in this meeting. If you don't, and it's a larger meeting, the waiting room, you might allow someone in that you, that actually is a troublemaker, but you aren't aware of who they are. So as many of these layers of security that you can implement, the better, particularly when it's a call that you're really concerned about. But just make sure you practice them beforehand.
And I'm realizing we're very close to the end of the hour, so this is taking a little bit longer than I expected. But another one key feature before I head on to how you do breakout rooms is that once you can kick people out, and once you have removed people you kicked out of the call, you might not want them to be able to come back again. So that is also a security feature you can have installed before. And then you have the breakout rooms. Sorry. To show you this. So you can click the breakout rooms, and I'm going to show you later. And if you want closed captioning, you have to fill in these things. But these are more things. If I miss something, I will follow up with it later. I wanted to talk to you about things to do during the calls. And now we talked about some of these things. So we were back on the virtual presentation on slide 11. But things to do during the call. So I'm very happy that you should all be able to see this. And last week we were talking about what is a good facilitator of a call. And one of the key things that we said that you have to actively make sure that you're muting people. So if someone logs in, say Mara is on the call and I hear her type, as a facilitator, I would mute her. Right, sorry. So I would mute her and I can click like that. Or if Mara has her video on, Mara, can you please turn on your video? So you might have seen this before. I don't see Mara now. Oh, interesting. Oh, now I see Mara. See? So hi, Mara. But this is actually very disruptive, as you can tell. And as we said last week as well, it's not good for accessibility because it interrupts or it takes a lot of bandwidth if everyone on this call would actually be on a video. So I can either here click on these 3 dots and I just stop her video, or if I'm hovering over her name, I can just stop video. But I can also spotlight.
I was just going to mention, you can't see the Zoom functions that you're doing on screen share right now. So just to describe for folks.
Okay.
And
right.
this is a problem just when you're screen sharing. Sometimes the back end of how you're doing things on Zoom isn't shown. I'm going to take off my video really quickly. But all you need to know is that you basically can click on a name in the participant list, you'll see two options, mute and more. You'll see this when you're the facilitator. You go under more and you can turn off someone's video.
Yeah, so there you can turn it off. You can also ask them to, if they don't have their video, you can ask them to share a video. And I guess I said before, you can make them host or co-host. So these are functions that are available to you. At the bottom of the participants list, you can also mute everyone at the same time, or you can unmute everyone at the same time. And then you can lock the meeting. So at the bottom of the participants list, there is 3 buttons again. So the third one is called more. You click on that in the lock meeting. And lock meeting is maybe something you would like to do at the end of a call, when you don't, or sorry, maybe 20 minutes into a call when you don't think more people should join it, or if you've had people who's tried to join it who shouldn't be on the call, you can lock it and kind of block them out. And I see that people are leaving. I'm very thankful for those who could stay. I would love it if those who are available could stay on for a little bit longer. And I will try and show you the breakout room sessions that I think a lot of you are here on this call to learn about. So these are all the things that shows up. So on the slide 13, you can see mute, stop video. These are all basic, invite, and screen share. Then you have breakout rooms. And breakout rooms, so this is sad that you can't see my screen. But if you go to slide 14, no, yes, I think, yeah, sorry. There's one slide missing maybe, no, I skipped it. So slide 13, you launch a breakout room as a facilitator by clicking on either if there is the breakout room that shows up on your screen, or you click on the 3 dots and it says breakout rooms. And then you select, because now we have 71 participants, I can select how many rooms I want. So say I select 3, and then I can do all the 71 being split up automatically by the software, or I can do it manually. If I click on manually, I get a list of the different breakout rooms. They're just generic names. I can rename them to whatever I want. And then on the right hand side of the name of the breakout room, there is a button that's called assign. When you hover on it, it says delete room or rename, but you can just also click on assign. Once you click on assign, you will see a list of all the participants you have on the call, and then you just add them to one of the breakout rooms. I'm not going to do that now because then we will lose some participants. The thing is, when you have breakout rooms, that they end up in virtual spaces that are different from the space you are at. As facilitator, once you've launched it, you can jump in from different breakout rooms. So if you go to slide 16, sorry. So if you go to slide 16, this is what it will look like for you as a, 14. This is what it will look like for you as a facilitator. So you have broken in Anne and Molly into breakout room 1, and you have Bob and John in breakout room 2. And then you can either join it, and once you've joined it, you can listen to what they're saying, you can see their chat, and all the chats are separate for each of the breakout rooms. But then you can also leave it and you can jump into the next call. And that way you can keep an eye on who is doing work and who's not doing work. Whatever you write in the chat in the breakout rooms, it is actually not posted throughout all the rooms, but if you want to broadcast something for everyone, there is the bottom of the toggle window. There's something that says broadcast a message to all. So that is a chat message. And then you can write, hey, 5 minutes left of breakout rooms, and then I put you all together. And then you send that off, and then it gets sent off to everyone, no matter which room they are. So something that this photo doesn't show is when you have people who's joined late, or people who were thrown out of the Zoom call because of internet connections. they will end up in a third row here and they are not assigned a room. So then you have to assign them to one of the rooms. But that's, and you can set these breakout rooms up in advance. But I talked about this last week. There are benefits with setting the breakout rooms up in advance, but it's probably easier for you to do it during the call because it's difficult if anything goes wrong. And there's quite a lot of, like back and forth, and you never know how many people attended who actually registered. So I prefer just doing it on the call, but it does take a while. So I would always recommend you to have about 10 minutes scheduled in your agenda to do the breaking up. Do I have any questions on this?
There was one great question around if you can organize them randomly or if they only are able to be organized randomly. And I answered in the chat, but it's useful to say that you can organize them randomly or manually. One useful tool is to ask folks to rename themselves.
Yeah.
Like we showed in the call last week, according to whatever category you want to manually separate them into. So you can see in this photo, it has breakout room 1, Anne and Molly, breakout room 2, Bob and John. You'll just see people's names. So for example, you could have people change their name to Anne Spanish and Molly Spanish, so that you can see folks who want to speak Spanish together could go into one breakout room together based on language. So as long as people's names are changed, you could organize them manually. If you know them ahead of time, you can also organize the groups just according to the name without any supplemental information, or the random option is the easiest because you just randomize it and then everyone is distributed.
Yeah, that's a really good, thank you so much, Mara. That's actually really, really helpful. And then I see a hand raise, and this is something that I didn't tell you before. So, sorry, Marisa, before I get to your question, I was just gonna tell everyone about the raising of hands. And this is something that can be used more often. When you want to say something, you raise your hand. So you click on your name. First you click on the manage or the participants, and then you click on your own name, and it says lower or unlower. So if you everyone who's on this call, I'm going to check in and see how many are attentive. Please click on your name and raise your hands. Wow. Perfect. Full attention. Yay. They get ordered according to the time people raise their hands. So Osvaldo was the first to raise their hand, then Sarah Peters. And then when you lower your hands, it still keeps like the order of who raised their hand first. If, as a facilitator, if I find that I have listened to someone who raised their hand, but they forgot to lower their hand, I, as a facilitator, it's up to me to lower their hand. So for example, on Marisa, I can lower her hand, or Salome, lower the hand. So this is also something you have to do, that is managing people. Wow, look at you, you're so active. Thank you so much. Perfect. So this is something you know, but it's for you as a facilitator to keep an eye on the raised hands and to lower them once people have had their chance to speak. That is also what makes a good facilitator. So for example, yeah, again, you just hover on the name and then you lower. And if there's someone who's unmuted, so you lower. I see there's some people who's unmuted themselves, so I click on their names and I click mute. Someone is... Okay. So, oopsie, sorry. Right, perfect. So you all got a hang of that very quickly. And then, so this is actually most of the things that we had on slide 15. Most of this has already been on a call. The only thing I haven't touched upon is how to kick someone off a call. So now I'm hovering over Catherine Klein. No, you disappeared?
I got it.
Right. I'm muting Catherine Klein. So here. So if I mute Mara, I wonder if I can kick her out. No, I can't kick her out because she's a co-host. Let's say, sorry, I'm gonna pick on Anita this time.
Hanna, we can't see your screen, remember?
Oh yeah, I'm so sorry.
It's okay.
So you can hover over someone's name at the bottom, it says remove, and that's how you kick someone off the call. And I think everything else from slide 15 has been touched upon already. And one last thing that I wanted to share with you is how to set up a poll. You have the meeting, we're on now. I'm going to show you in the interface what it looks like. So even when you're on a call, if the call is started, like our call has started, you can add a question. So we already had the check-in and what software you wanted to know. And here you can see that most of you voted spreadsheet and slides. And if you want to add another poll, you can say, how are you today? Oh yeah, and the question, so that would be the name of the poll as it shows up on your screen here. But then you might want to ask the questions again, or you can have several questions in here. Good. Or so-so. Right? And then I save it. And it doesn't automatically show up on the Zoom call, but you have to, hover over the Zoom bar. So this is like all those options you have, like the mute mic, the start video, manage participants, and then there is the polling. So you click on the polling as a facilitator, and then you click on, you can see the last poll if you had a poll before.
Hanna, we can't do this.
No, I'm just explaining. So then if you can see the poll from before, you can toggle between the two polls. So there is like a little arrow that points down, and then you click on that, and then there is something that's called launch poll. And then it automatically shows up on everyone. And it's anonymous, so I can't see your names. But I can see how many has voted. So now we have 26 has voted out of 65. So 41%, 43%. Most people are good, that's good. We have some so-sos and seeing better days. I feel with you. Right. And then as a facilitator, it doesn't, you have to end the poll yourself. So now it's been going on for 40 seconds, I'm gonna end it. And then there's, when you have ended it, there's an option to share results, and then I can share it with you so you all see it for a little bit. And then as a facilitator, you have to click on something that says stop sharing. So it doesn't come automatically, you have to be a little bit active on it. But what is good is that you can launch polls during a call. And going back to the virtual slide, or our presentation. So on slide 16, this is what it looks like for me. Yeah, so this is the bar. You see on the right-hand side, you see the bar, and you see the polling that is in red, kind of. Right, and then last thing, and then we're almost done. So sorry, we're already 13 minutes past, but I'm so thankful for everyone who stayed on. The last thing is, what do you do after the call? So there's ways to retrieve all the participant list afterwards, and you can also get recordings of the call if you recorded. So the recording is in your settings. And here you will see that there is a recording going on, but I can't access it because it's not been finished and it will be processed. But I can, for example, see the recording I did of another virtual forum I had a couple of weeks ago. And there's a link, so sort of, it's not a YouTube link, but you can directly see the video. If you want to retrieve all your participants, you go to admin. Under admin, there's something called account management. And then reports. Under reports, there's something called meeting. And here I can retrieve old meetings. So I can retrieve the CSV, so that is the raw data of who has filled in the registration report. So then I would get all your, the names that you had, the organization, emails, etc. Again, bearing in mind GDPR, I would advise you to use this data, like you are not actually legally allowed to use this for anything else that is not related to your call. Yeah, but this is what you can do as a facilitator. So then you can access it and you can send it like, thank you for joining our call. If you want to continue staying in touch about feminists, please join this listserv. So that's how you can avoid getting sued for GDPR. You couldn't email them all the time. That would be a GDPR infringement. Right. And then what we said in our last call is about accessibility feedback. So that you might want to set up a little survey after your call to see was it accessible to you, what can we do better, etc. Like we shared after our last call, we will share it after this call. And we spoke about it quite a lot on our last call, and we advise you, if you didn't attend it, at the bottom of this presentation, there is the direct link to a recording on YouTube, but also the direct link to the presentation that has all these details on it. And yeah, I know we're 16 minutes past. For those of you who are here, we would love to hear any feedback you have. So on slide 19, if there's anything that you would like to have had more training on, etc., please go to slide 19, drag a little post-it note out to the document, and you just directly start typing, hey, hey, hey. So you have to go to the presentation. You can't do this through my screen share. And you please add your name. If someone says something that you agree with, you can add a heart. I love you all. Okay, this is very, okay. So, and then you add a little heart if you agree with what other people are saying. Right? So please, you can do this. Don't forget to add your name. It's very helpful if you add your names. And if you have any questions, now would be the time. Like, we can still be on the call for a little bit longer. Don't hesitate to send us questions afterwards. And yeah, you can unmute yourself now if you have any questions.
And be sure to join us next Thursday. We'll send out an invite sometime today or tomorrow. It'll be focused on digital security, and we'll be having a guest speaker.
Yeah, and then we will go more into depth about the question that Ulla raised earlier on the call today.
This is great. I missed the first one, so I will watch it as soon as I can today. But how do you add that post-it?
So you go to the virtual presentation if you're not there already, and then you take one of these post-its and you drag it, and then you.
Where do you get the post-it?
At the bottom of the. At the bottom of the slide, there is a stack of post-its.
I see.
So you just take it and drag it to the presentation, and then you type.
Got it. But I can't do it from the slide that I see on my screen now, correct?
No, that's true. So what you're seeing now is a screen share, and it's not interactive.
Got it. Okay, that's why I was confused. Thank you.
Yeah, that's okay.
This is great. Okay, I took a lot of notes. I'm going to go over it all. Thank you.
We will also send out a little training document for everyone after the training series. Oh, we're getting them up. Big hearts here. So the thing with interactive presentations is they are a little bit chaotic, but you just have to embrace it. It's quite nice.
This is really wonderful. I'm in the women's major group, but I'm really in the group for older persons and disabilities. So I will make sure that once we get the results of this presentation, I'll share both with both groups.
Perfect.
Because you're really, really helpful.
Thank you.
Because a lot of us are kind of beginners on all this.
Yeah, I think that's true for a lot of people at the moment. Like some people are experts on Google Docs, etc. But
well, we would love to have someone like that in the older persons group join us as a volunteer, because we certainly could use someone like you too.
Well, me and Mara are learning a lot. Yeah, thank you. But we're learning a lot as well as we go along.
I want to pivot to Chantal's question in the chat. Chantal is asking, is there a way to have a consent form for participants around retrieving participant info to follow up with them via email? Chantal, I'm not sure if I'm totally understanding this, so feel free to hop off mute if you want to clarify, but essentially when someone registers for the call, you'll have access to their name and email, and you can choose other information as well, like we showed in the presentation. You will have access to those emails, but not everyone else in the call will have access to those emails. So when someone is registering, they're aware that they're giving you their email for the call, and that you can follow up with them. I would recommend BCCing any follow-up information so that not everyone in the call gets each other's email and name information. If I'm misunderstanding what you mean by a consent form around emails, feel free to clarify. Okay, great.
Yeah.
Chantal says that makes sense.
And I think it's important to know also that the Zoom software is based in the US, but there is going to be a new security issue launched, or a security feature launched, where you can choose your regional server. And if you're based in the Europe or any other region that uses GDPR, you might want to switch to Europe, and then I'm sure there will be a GDPR kind of option included. But as I said, like what Mara said, just make sure that you BCC people. If you BCC someone in an email, other people cannot see who has the emails gone to. So that is very important if you use a lot of emails.
Great.
Perfect.
Any questions folks have before we sign off and wish everyone a great rest of the day, evening, afternoon, wherever you are?
And we're all welcoming you to join us on our next call next Thursday. We haven't decided on the time. We are sorry that this is not in any other language than English. We are exploring if we can do a mini session for other languages later. So yeah, please bear with us. This is a little bit of an experiment for us as well, but it definitely needs to happen in other languages too.
Okay, great.
Right, perfect.
Everyone.
Thank you so much, everyone, for staying on until 23 minutes past 4.
Thank you.
Wherever you're based. I again invite you all to turn on your, I'm gonna stop the share. Sorry, pause the share. And I invite you all to come on with your video. I can see who's on the call. Oh, I see ya. Hey, hey, Mara. Hey. Perfect. Ayushka, Sunas. Oh, so many nice faces. So many new faces. Eleanor, I see. It was lovely to have you all on. If you have any other questions, we are going to send another.
You closed my video, so I can't show myself.
No, we can see you.
You can see me, but I cannot. Okay, fine.
We can see
Oh,
you.
first of all.
Au revoir. Have a lovely day or evening, wherever you are.
Thank you. Thank you so much. You're amazing, ladies. Thank you.
Ciao, ciao, ciao.
Thank you, thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
À bientôt. Au revoir.
Thank you so much.
Bye bye.
Bye. À
Bye.
bientôt.